Back to our In Depth with Academia. I'm Richard Price, yeah, that Richard from academia.edu, and I'm genuinely excited to be here with you. Today, as always, I'll be digging into a recent academic paper and presenting it neutrally, not endorsing, just exploring, right? It's what we do here, just surfacing ideas and seeing what they might mean for you. Okay? Today's episode is about a fascinating paper by Jacob Cleophas Defon-Ziku, titled La philosophie africaine et son tournant hermeneutique, which, if you're not a French speaker, translates pretty much to African philosophy and its hermeneutic turn. Quite a mouthful. But hey, stick with me, because the questions it raises are ones you might find eye-opening, whether you're immersed in philosophy or just someone curious about how cultures make sense of the world. So, what's the core question here? Well, at the heart of Defon-Ziku's paper is a big one. What does it mean for African philosophy to undergo a hermeneutic turn, and why is this important, not just academically, but for how African societies interpret their own traditions, knowledge, and sense of self? If that sounds abstract, think of it this way. How do you interpret a story that's been handed down for generations? Is it just a tale? Or is it a way of understanding life, the universe, everything? And wait, what does hermeneutic even mean? In this context, it's basically about interpretation, unpacking the layers of meaning within symbols, stories, rituals, and practices. Now, what's really cool, or at least, what strikes me as interesting, is that Defon-Ziku isn't just talking about some shift in philosophy as an elite subject. He's mapping out a movement, almost a shift in mindset in how African philosophy is done. It's like, instead of seeing old traditions as something static, or even just as exotic curiosities, this hermeneutic turn asks, what if these traditions are alive, dynamic, and deserve to be interpreted with the same seriousness we bring to, Plato or Kant? And here's where Basil Juliat Fouda, a key figure in the paper, comes in. Fouda was a philosopher who argued that African philosophy should be an hermeneutic of meaning, essentially a way to interpret the human and the universe, often referencing God, the father of existence. Fouda's approach, according to Defon-Ziku, focuses especially on oral traditions, myths, stories, songs, the kinds of things not always written down, but wow, so rich in meaning and social significance. So what method or approach is Defon-Ziku summarizing here? It's a bit of a break with the past. Instead of endlessly debating whether real philosophy has to look like Western written traditions, this view says, well, no. Let's interpret African cultures on their own terms. Let's use hermeneutics to dive into those oral traditions, extracting their philosophical value, and not just for the sake of academia, but to understand how people make meaning, how identity gets shaped in a global context where local and global are always meeting, sometimes clashing, sometimes blending. But, and this is key, Defon-Ziku points out, this is not just collecting folklore. He stresses the rigor involved here. Interpretation isn't wishy-washy. There are methods and philosophical discussions about how to genuinely unpack and understand the deeper meaning behind practices, words, and symbols. Plus, there's debate. Some critics say focusing too much on culture turns philosophy into a kind of ethnophilosophy, maybe too much about culture, not enough about critical thinking. But others, including Fouda and Defon-Ziku, argue this turn is not just necessary, it's a radical, productive step for African philosophy. Now, how about we pause a second? I was reading this and suddenly remembered being at a museum a few years ago and seeing masks from West Africa, elaborate, beautiful things. I stood there thinking, did their makers see them as art, science, religion, all of the above, or something else that doesn't translate neatly to the usual categories? Anyway, sorry, back to our topic. Just goes to show how tricky and interesting interpretation can be, right? So what are the takeaways for you as a listener? Well, if you're in academia or education, Defon-Ziku's work encourages you to think more deeply about the meaning behind cultural practices, especially oral traditions, which are, frankly, too often overlooked. If you're from an African background, the message might be that there is philosophical gold in those inherited stories and ways of life, worth interpreting, debating, and connecting to the wider world. And for anyone It's a reminder that knowledge, tradition, even philosophy aren't fixed things. They're always dialoguing, always evolving. So in wrapping up, again, I'm presenting, not endorsing, but it's clear that Defan Ziku's paper offers a lens for reimagining how philosophy can emerge from every culture's unique way of making sense of the world. Academic research, as always, isn't about final truths, but opening new doors for thought and self-understanding. If this piqued your curiosity, maybe next time you hear a family story or see a work of art from another culture, you might find yourself asking, not just what does it mean, but how should I try to understand what it means? That's the hermeneutic spirit. Thanks so much for joining me on In Depth with Academia. Keep questioning, keep reflecting, and see you next time.